Welcome everyone to our CMO panel in this beautiful room. I'm excited to have these guys. And we're here to talk about AI, past the curiosity. No one here is asking, should we be using it? And just really understanding what business value we can extract out of it. Before we start, I'd like to introduce, oh my gosh, the superstar. I'm in total awe. Like the golden hoodie, Robert Lopez, CMO of North's Collective. Before we move on, Robin, maybe you can share how much of a big deal is a golden hoodie?
It's amazing. So they don't give them out very easily. So you have to really be a contributing member of the Salesforce ecosystem. So I don't know what exactly you did, Robert, but you've clearly done a lot. I've wanted a golden hoodie for years, but I'm not even close to it, you know?
Wow.
So, and I don't know, I think it used to be on the success forums, like you'd have to contribute to that, but I think it's now, if you're a general upstanding member of the community. Yeah.
It's
but
huge.
how did you get it?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Look, to be honest with you, they really talk around this whole trailblazer ecosystem and giving back to the community. So one thing I've focused on from the beginning of my Salesforce journey with North Collective is ensuring that as we learn on our journey, I help others learn and maybe avoid pitfalls and take that on board their journey. So I've done dozens of customer reference sessions for Salesforce, spoken at key events globally.
You've really served.
Given my time, I've given hair follicles literally to the Salesforce journey. And so, it was very exciting to receive it at World Tour Sydney earlier this year.
Yeah.
Oh, it gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Because we always talk to clients, we're like, you just need a Robert Lopez. And they're like, who's Robert Lopez? We're like, oh, you have to meet him. And we've introduced you to so many of our clients where we just want them to be inspired to think about it differently. Because a lot of people go into the transformation journey being like, it's too hard, I don't like it. They've got an issue that they're dealing with, but they've just got to turn that around and learn, which I think is what you did. You're up to how many badges?
Yes, I need a life, as my wife says. I've got almost 2,500 badges.
2,500.
Oh, wow.
On Trailhead. Yeah, lots of learning.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hours.
A lot of hours.
Yeah.
A lot of early morning scrolling the phone, getting some done before getting out of bed.
Yeah. So I don't think that we need to give you further introduction than that.
I'm here.
And we have another legendary woman. I'm really excited. The founder of Australian Centre for AI in Marketing and AI Ready Consulting, twice recognized in the CMO 50 across different sectors, an award-winning executive known for driving growth, customer transformation, and digital innovation. Formerly CMO of World Vision Australia and H&R Block. We had the privilege of working with you there. And now advises boards and brands on responsible AI. She's also the creator of the AI Power Hour series, a champion for women in leadership, and an advocate for ethical AI. This is what I love the most. In her spare time, she is an author for children's book and unexpected TikTok content creator. I have to see these content that you're creating on TikTok. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you. It's not as good as I've got FOMO. I feel so inadequate next to the gold.
It's a bit of gold shine here.
And of course, my beloved business partner of 14 years, a partner at Xenai, where he helps organizations unlock measurable ROI from their Salesforce investments through intelligent CX transformation with deep expertise in all the Salesforce clouds. It was actually listed here, all the Salesforce clouds. And, really brings that commercial acumen and technical lens to AI-powered customer experiences. He works across different sectors to translate Salesforce complexity into strategic outcomes, and is a regular speaker, podcast guest, and industry commentator on the future of data-led marketing and transformation. The funny thing is, like, when he tells me that he's a geek, and he tells the audience he's a geek, I'm like, yes, he is. And he loves talking about that we're going to live forever. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're either going to live forever or we're going to die very soon. So it's either way. But if society doesn't crumble, then we're going to live forever because of technology. So, yeah.
Wow, that went dark really quickly in the intro.
The glass is half full by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's just the theory that technology is going very rapidly, so we'll cure most diseases by the time we hit 2030, and then by 2040 we'll have nanotechnology that's like robots inside ourselves, personalized healthcare, things like that. So the likelihood that we'll die from natural disease is going to reduce massively. But AI is coming. Everything could go really bad or really good. So it's kind of a half full, half empty glass.
Wow.
Okay, let's focus on business, and we'll deep dive into, what's going to happen to us in the future because of AI. Where is AI showing up as a true strategic partner, not just a content generator, but something that informs real decisions? Can I start with you, Louise?
Sure. I think it went from people playing a little bit with LLMs to now how are we actually using it for deep customer insights and research. What's happening in synthetic data is also really interesting. So we're actually seeing it being much more of a strategic partner than ever before. So it's gone from being sort of peripheral or kind of a few little tests to actually we're starting to see it being much more embedded into how you actually can use it for strategy.
Like a business advisor.
Yes.
Even.
I mean, on a personal level, like I've trained my ChatGPT so much that like it is a true sort of strategic partner for me.
Yeah. Beyond that, even more like someone who knows you best. Like I even named my ChatGPT.
What's it called?
Lumi.
Lumi.
Because it gives me a lot of illumination.
Oh, that's good. I call mine Steve.
Steve. Why Steve?
Just a classic Aussie name, Just he's a bloke. He's a common bloke.
Mine's Frank because his answers are always Frank.
There you go.
Straight to the point.
There you go.
Yeah. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I guess, initially my team would use it for those sort of creative pieces, write our social posts. And then over time I realized this, we were sort of losing that brand authenticity and brand voice. So that authenticity versus automation piece came in.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're really driving more strategic focus through the use of AI and that hyper segmentation function, using the tools to really help us drive the right message to the right segment at the right time. And that's where we've found the most value, growing our engagement in the digital landscape has grown our foot traffic into the venues as well. So it is a strategic partner when it comes to segmentation for us.
Amazing. Robin?
Yeah, it's I think there's tools that organizations have now, but it's very early stages of adoption. But AI is already in the tools at the moment. Where I've seen it be very helpful to me because I'm a strategic consultant, so I'll often go into a client and have to really understand the context and then provide recommendations. I can do that without AI, but it's much easier if I use AI to inform my thinking because it fills in gaps that I wouldn't have thought about otherwise. So I find it very useful, even at the top level thinking, to help me with my job. And it's a matter of time before it's kind of doing most of my job. So for me, it's very much a key part of what I do. I am also on the side getting into vibe coding as well, which I don't know if you guys have heard about vibe coding.
Yeah.
But it's basically using the LLM to prompt code generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fed into you in terms of like just copy paste the code.
That's right. Yeah. And that's got its own nuances. Like you also have to train the AI to write code in the best way possible. So you give it rules and instructions and say, don't create code or don't look for solutions outside of what I'm trying to ask you for. Because it will go forever. You'll tell it, I need this to work. And it will go and find an application, install it and, get it to work. And then you've got all this other stuff there. So it's very early days, but it makes me think about the future of technology. If I'm a company, I can vibe code my own applications. What would that look like? It's different to today where you buy a license and it's standardized for all customers. Yeah. So it's a new world.
The chessboard's about to be thrown up in the air.
Massively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How I feel is that at your fingertips, like literally, you have access to depth of information and expertise, right? The very simple prompt is like act as the best business strategist. Like what would Elon Musk think in this situation? And all of a sudden I have access to how people are interpreting all of the wealth of, information that he shared in the articles written about him. And all of a sudden I could think like him.
Yeah.
It's like, that's just incredibly powerful.
And I actually use deep research. I don't know if you guys have used it. It's really, really good. So just actually allowing that extra time to actually then really sort of investigate every single part of the internet to really sort of land at some strategic thinking.
Yeah.
And I do actually sometimes I go, okay, which persona do I want to be thinking about in this particular moment? So I like what you actually just said about that particular persona.
And also just the variety of thinking, like the different mental models. Like how would a lawyer think about this? Because a lawyer or an accountant, they're all about risk management, right? A business owner is someone who thinks about the vision and the future. So you have a balanced approach in terms of how you create your strategy and encompassing.
And that's what we're actually seeing, which I think is really interesting, is I was actually on stage at Mumbrella yesterday and we were talking about this with the CMO Unplugged, is now you can actually talk to the data and say, okay, I am this persona. Yeah. We're about to do this product. What would you think about that? So, the fact that we can actually go into, you've talked about the hyper-segmentation. But now with both synthetic data and existing data and actually going deep into what that audience profile looks like, you can now start really leveraging AI to create that better product by persona. So it's a very interesting stage.
Yeah. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors and platforms, and someone like Robin, who's not even a coder, can vibe code now as well. Like, it's so hard to really pick. Like, sometimes that is what's going to take a lot of time. Like, oh, my team would say, oh, this is amazing. Someone else would say, this is amazing. There's just so many available choices. Can you please share what are the ones that you would really like say, oh, you got to try this one, your most favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I live and breathe ChatGPT. And deep research I love. And I think it is the go-to. For us at North Collective, you got to look, if you as an organization, what makes the most sense and has the best fit with your tech stack and with what you're doing, and ethically as well. You've got to have your guardrails in place. And so we're Salesforce driven tech stack, and so we went with Agentforce, and it's made sense for our business, and now we're looking at bringing it into our marketing cloud tech stack as well, to enhance that hyper segmentation even more. And so I think as a business case, it's really important to look back at your company, understand, and again, put everyone's hats on. The CFO's hat, what's the cost of what you're implementing? The CIO's hat, what's the potential security risks? What are the pitfalls you got to make sure you don't fall into? And really understand what's going to deliver the most value back to the business based on some strong use cases that you need to have from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think, of course, you can sleep well at night because, like what you said, with ChatGPT, you got to have the guardrails in place in terms of what data you're feeding in, right? Because it's like a two-way street. At least with the Agentforce, you know that your data is protected
100%.
As far from the enterprise.
How do you get around consumption pricing when you're dealing with your stakeholders and you're like, we think it's going to cost this much, but we don't really know. It may skyrocket, but at least we'll get more value. Like, how do you explain that?
I always do it over lunch. Everyone's happier at lunchtime.
With wine.
Look, I think in the end, it's storytelling. Yeah. And as marketers, we love storytelling. Yeah. And so I always make sure that I've built out the scenarios, but I've always got, probably buffer 10, 15% either side. And I talk to the fact that, okay, if we overconsume, it means the product's being overutilized and what we assumed that it did. We used raw data. We started with our contact center, understood how many calls a year, how many low value calls are we trying to take away from them to drive through our agentic task force, workforce. And with that, we could at least build out what we assumed we were going to utilize annually. So models change, Salesforce is talking about changing the consumption model again.
That's right.
So, that might change things a little bit, but at least we went in with all stakeholder buy-in ticked off, knowledge that this is what we were looking at utilizing. And we're within 5% of that currently.
And I think the trend generally is consumption pricing is going down as it's becoming more available and used. I think that was the early adopters paid a bit of a premium for it, but now it's like it should become a lot more accessible.
What about Louise?
Well, yes, I love the OpenAI product suite. It's a really interesting moment from a marketing perspective, is that we can't keep up with the tsunami of updates from the tech providers, and people are feeling overwhelmed, and there's a bit of this cognitive overload of how do I keep up? And everybody feels like they're behind, but there's no way you can keep up because just the extent of updates and everything's coming out. So I say take a big breath and actually work out your AI readiness framework? Do you have the people, the systems, capabilities? Do you have the right information architecture? Because, I mean, it's only as good as, your information architecture. So really sort of take a breath and do that, because what I've seen it not work is when people do chase after the tech and then it all becomes really fragmented and whatever. But from there, I mean, once you actually have that, a big thing is to assess every tech like you would any other solution, and understand, its use cases, the pros and cons, do a SWOT of what that actual tech looks like. But my big thing is test and learn as well. So one big thing is, we were talking about Salesforce. If you've got an existing MarTech stack and it's actually already AI enabled, my suggestion would be try and work out how you can leverage your existing platforms rather than just kind of like adding a whole heap new ones. But ultimately, I suppose my biggest thing is, first of all, take a breath before you run after the tech. And on a personal level, I do love OpenAI. I love Jasper. I think Jasper's fantastic for, making sure you've got that right brand voice and you don't have the double dashes from the chat GPT, or the emojis. And the other one I really love is Midjourney.
I love it. I just want to say thank you for letting everyone take a breath, because this is what happens. It's like such a huge paradox of our lives right now. Like, our tech are just amazing, but we feel a lot more stressed. That whole cognitive load is something that we really need to think about. It just gives us so much options and ability to run after opportunities, but at what costs, right? So your advice is like, take a breath. Let's take a moment and really just, people, we got to take a breath, right? The tech won't go away.
And otherwise,
such a good advice.
People get into this real state of inertia as well. And then people get into the fear mode and all sorts of things. So Howardson was actually talking at Umbrella yesterday, and it was really interesting because they actually took people on an offsite to icebergs and actually just went, okay, let's unpack. Does the agency model still work? And they actually had a really interesting pivot point, and then they actually started a tech agency as part of their model. But that's a really good example of, let's take everybody off site, take a breath, and actually really evaluate where we are and where we want to go, rather than just running and everybody being in fear, lizard brain and kind of running around.
Yeah, I love it. And Midjourney, you must be technical.
Oh, no, I just love creating.
Just because it requires, what's that social app to use it?
Twitch?
No.
I use it through Twitch, I'm sure.
Use it through Twitch. There's the other one that was like the Web3 chat.
I just use it for...
Oh, direct on the website.
Direct, I used
Discord, do you mean?
Discord,
Oh, Discord.
Oh, yes.
Discord,
It was a bit difficult to get
I
set
know,
up
I was
to
like,
start.
I can't even log in. I have to get a Discord. What the hell? It looks fabulous. And there's this new one called Vio. I don't know if anyone's ever used it or tried it, but I'm just seeing it all over LinkedIn that it can create Hollywood style.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Hollywood
the
quality.
latest update is amazing.
From Google, the V3 or something.
Yeah. Is that V3 or VO?
There's another one, VO, which is vibe coding.
Oh, right. Okay, Robert, let's talk about your favorite toys.
Well, so obviously for work, we're Salesforce partners, so we're all about Agentforce. And all of the other Einstein features within Salesforce, there's heaps. It's not just Agentforce. So if you've got Salesforce, you've actually got licenses for AI already. You don't need to buy Agentforce. You can use the Einstein features within it. And then it's a consumption model for Agentforce. Outside of that, though, I think also to your point, if you've already got the tech, you've already got the legal contracts with the tech provider, you've got the compliance information, like all of the stuff you need to put customer data in there safely, you've got already. If I've got a ChatGPT personal login and I'm putting customer data into that, that's bad. So I think there needs to be very clear guidance from the organization around what tools are you allowed to use and how can you use them. A lot of organizations haven't yet put a policy
100%.
out. They are like, we don't really know, but just try stuff, but that's really risky.
Or not actually giving any.
Yeah.
Because they're really concerned. So they're not actually.
That's right.
So it's a really interesting tension point. Do you have the right guardrails versus over like letting everybody go hell for leather. I actually saw Salesforce. I was working with a client and Salesforce came in to show their AI capability, and it really just, everybody was like, oh my gosh, for something that wasn't intuitive, they felt that there was some complexity there. They just went, oh wow, this is like a game changer for them. So I agree. If you can get, especially if you can get a vendor to come in and actually explain and show it, because we've all had that moment where it's like, this is magic. You know, that moment where you do something and you go, wow, this actually looks like I'm cheating almost. And there's that magical
like an
moment.
Unfair advantage.
Yeah. I had that when, you know, Salesforce was presenting. It was, you know, so get your existing MarTech in.
Yeah. And it's the same game we've been playing. It's like, it's adoption. It's the adoption of the latest features that are in your current license. Just adopt them. Yeah. And that's a hard game to play, but it requires like constantly keeping up to date and understanding and learning and training. On the other side, on a personal level, I've been vibe coding quite a bit. And that's been a really interesting process because it takes time. It's similar to deep research where you give it a task and it works and comes back to you. So I will be in two tools. I'll be in Cursor. I use actually VO, which is a front-end vibe coding tool. So I'll give it an instruction and then let it run on one screen and then go to my other screen and I'll give another AI. So I use New Spark, which is more of a deep thinking creative. Like you can build a spreadsheet of research or you can do a PowerPoint presentation with it. It takes a long time, but it's like, so what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, give me a design system, like a brand framework for this thing I'm thinking about doing. And then I'll throw that into Cursor and let it run. And then I'll come back and be like, okay, now I need this. So all I'm doing is managing multiple agents that have quite a bit of work to do. It's not like just chatting with ChatGPT. It's giving people work. And the thing that holds them up is when I don't check their work. I'm like, oh shit, that's right. This one's done. Go back. Okay, what do I think? Yep, that's good. Here's some more feedback. So imagine the future is us really managing multiple agents doing multiple different jobs, some autonomously, some not. You know, that's how we're going to work in the future.
Wow.
It's really interesting.
He is a nerd. You're right. Jeez.
But also there's an interesting, I was looking at somebody in my network and they're actually looking at an org chart where potentially their junior staff reports into an agent.
AI, oh my.
Wow.
And so what you're actually talking about is really interesting, right? Because how are we working alongside agents, and then what does that look like? And there's some really interesting dynamics there, because even then you were actually, there was almost a little bit of a level of stress because you were sort of going from this to this. Yeah. So then how do we as humans keep up when we're actually leveraging different agents around us and still feel like we've got friendly fences? That's
right. Yeah. But it's only for a period of time we'll need to do that, because eventually it's going to be more efficient to have an agent manage the other agents.
Oh, yes.
It's like way more efficient. And then it's like, what role do we play? I mean, the only role I see us playing is legislative. Like if I'm a lawyer and I need to approve a legal document, I need a human to do that because the law says I do. Or if I'm a doctor to prescribe, I need to have a physical human. But outside that, most other jobs are pretty automatable. Yeah.
Well, don't they say the University of Massachusetts, I think, said that 85% of what we do every day is actually explained by patterns. Sorry, 80%. But it is interesting. So most of what we do is actually explainable by patterns.
Yeah. Pretty basic. Yeah.
Which is a bit
But you can't get a robot to wear a golden hoodie, can you?
Yeah.
Well, you know,
what about what is it, CP30?
Oh,
C3PO could do it probably.
Yeah.
Would you recommend people to try vibe coding? Is it something that you think, business leaders or?
It is, yeah. It's more about awareness. So when I think about product development, you used to have a team of people. Like you'd have a developer, you'd have a product manager, you'd have a designer, you'd have a copywriter. You'd have all of these skills and maybe seniors and juniors collaborating. Now you just need a product manager. That's it. And maybe a tester that's going to be just another person testing. But now the skills, because I can do all of my skills, and we've seen this with clients where they used to have a team of marketing cloud people. Now they've got one person that is responsible for everything. Yep. Like I use ChatGPT for copy now, or I use this for design. So it's shrinking the jobs, or I guess increasing the size of skills one person has to do more jobs. And it's meaning that the average person can do anything. Like there's nothing holding us back. It's a time of creativity because we've got these new canvases to paint on.
Beautifully said. Canvas is to pen. I love it. So we've talked about all these amazing platforms from an enterprise level. I love what you've all said, that it's important to, take a breath, step back, and really assess. Don't be led by the technology, and understand the pain points or the objectives, and take your stakeholders on a journey. Let's talk about budget. How do you get approved? Like, these tools aren't cheap, right? And it all adds up. Even, the vibe coding, the Jasper, the ChatGPT for your organization, Agentforce is, we know that Salesforce isn't a cheap platform, right? They deliver the goods, they deliver the results, but it's not cheap. How do you get approved?
Yeah, and it's a journey. The approval's a journey. I remember back in the day when we started this investigation, we met with Salesforce first time in January 2018, and we signed the dotted line in June 2019. So it was a year and a half really before we even signed. And that was important, because we had to investigate options, understand costs, cost benefits. So from a stakeholder perspective, especially in our organization, CFO, CEO, board of directors, was really important from the beginning to understand their drivers, their wants, their must-haves.
Yes.
Because, even at a board level, each board member has different drivers.
Yes.
Some, there's the financial drivers in our organization. Some are very driven by the community work that we do. And so it was about really storytelling at every level, but having conviction in what we were presenting and talking about, really believing in what we were doing and believing in the journey we were on. I remember back in the day, I sat with the CEO and I said, before we start this, I just want a day or two to build a vision. I want to actually have a digital transformation vision. Yeah. I might stuff it up, but it hasn't changed, to be a true leader in digital transformation using new, sustainable and emerging technologies as a means to build our brand, tell our stories, and enrich relationships with our communities. And that stuck with us today. So whatever we do, whatever project we're doing, be it AI, customization, anything, it always comes back to that and comes back to our overall vision. So because we brought our board and our C-suites and even our mid-level managers on the journey since the beginning, they understand our why behind it. And I think that's really important, getting that why defined and getting them on board with that.
Yeah, you began with an end in mind. You had the right intentions. And I love what you said about each stakeholder. When I hear you say that, I hear they all have different love languages, right?
They do.
You gotta speak their love languages. And it's so important to make sure that at every level, it resonates with them in terms of this overarching vision. And when you did that, so one or 2 days, you did the vision, and then you were able to get them across the line in a year and a half. What were the other things? Like, after you did the vision, how did you figure out the whole journey?
So then it was we had the vision, and we wanted to understand the objectives.
Yes.
So we built out our core objectives. We had 3 of them. Create a single source of customer truth. Most companies want that.
Yes.
We've got 77,000 members with data across, I think, 32 disparate systems.
Wow.
So how do we create a single source of truth? Second objective, how do we get smarter with our data? How do we use this rich customer data, zero first party data, to really drive business outcomes, which we were struggling to do. We knew we had this data, but how do we really make sense of it all? And the third, from a selfish marketing lens, was really to be able to create these hyper-personalized omni-channel, marketing capabilities within our tech stack. And so those 3 objectives, along with our vision, have stuck with us the whole way through. And so along the way, we roadmapped I gave every year a bit of a theme. So year 1, was bringing the product in. Then we went through different themes. This is the year of AI now. We had a year of personalization. We had a year of ROI that we were working on. Yeah. So it was really important for us to have these clear objectives annually, so that we didn't get lost in the mix, because it's very easy to get tied down with the day-to-day and lose the vision.
Yes.
So by having these annual sort of strategy sessions and building the vision for the year, we could at least have strategy for that year and direction. And we, again, communication, every board paper that I submit every month that goes to the board, it has something back to what we're doing on this journey, so they understand where we're at and what our vision is moving forward for the year ahead. Yeah.
I also love what you said about you gotta back yourself. You gotta have the conviction.
Yep.
And I know that you would, this is something last night that you also mentioned, we need to be bold, right? Because you're going to get detractors and people are afraid. And what about you, Louise?
I think you articulated it so well. I think you have to have a vision. So what is it that you're doing? It can't just be we're doing it. It has to be, okay, we're going to be the leader in customer experience, going to be the leader in this category. We're going to, Grant Thornton did it and they ended up giving people a 9-day work week. You know, what is it that's actually, but as a result, their employee engagement went up. There was a whole heap of other factors. I think, first of all, what is the true north that you're actually going? Sorry, North's collective. The true north. The second is there are a lot of tools that you actually are very low cost, you know. So you can do a bit of a test and learn of different pilots. You don't have to do the big expensive one, but just like I said before, anything that you're doing and you're embedding, just make sure that there's that ROI as part of it and you map that out. Where it gets a little bit tricky, and I think it goes into the throwing the chessboard up in the air, is what does that then look like for operational efficiencies? So, for example, if you're offshoring at the moment, you know, do you actually need to offshore given natural language? And, you know, there's a whole heap of things that you can do. So there's sort of, I'm not sure the old models will necessarily work in the new world order in the next couple of years. So I think the name of the game is actually exactly what you said. How do you actually make sure that you get your board across it? So it's really important that the boards have got good training in this, and that also, we're talking about it shortly, but around the governance and really making sure that there are right frameworks in place so that everybody feels safe and secure. Then also getting the ELT, but also taking you took people on the journey. And my previous role, my very first sort of engagement that I wanted to get across was the CFO.
Yes.
And how did we actually, you know, what was his needs and what were mine, and then how do we actually learn from each other? And that's when the magic happens, right? Because you're actually taking your, you know, your first team. So often, you know, we think of our teams as being the people below, but actually your first team should always be your peers, and actually taking them through the process, I think, is really important. But you can do a lot of, you know, short test and learns. Like, I don't think you have to, my whole thing is like, just get people on the tools. Like some of them are really very cheap. Just get them. But again, you have to make sure you're working with your IT team, make sure that the right governance is there. So short term, I think you can actually do it fairly cheaply and sort of work out what existing ones you can play around with. Longer term, I think it's going to have, I think the ROI modeling is going to be a lot more complex.
It doesn't need to be this whole big transformation right away. You could do small bets, right? And build on it.
You can do small bits, but again, going back to, I think you have to have a true north about where you're actually going.
Yeah. There's still an overarching vision that excites everyone.
Exactly. And just have those sugar hits along the way. What is it that
I love that.
Yes, because otherwise it's not people want to be incentivized about why they're doing something.
That sugar hit that you're talking about is so important for momentum. Right? Because that's where people are like, oh, I can actually do this. And when they, you know, that's when they believe in themselves, like, oh, now they're part of the journey.
And the hard thing is, if there's so much narrative around, okay, everybody's jobs are going and, you know, this whole sort of let's all go and jump out the building. That's not, you know, we're actually, and I'm not talking about, because everybody goes into the prediction mode, but historically we're actually incredibly bad at predicting the future because our construct of how we actually predict the future is from the past, right? So we don't actually know. So you might be 100% right. I mean, living forever based on our current biology, but you know what I mean? That's my frame of reference doesn't connect with that. But Robin could be exactly right. So my whole thing is, how do you actually get your teams to be okay with the next, so I call it the next 90 days. So my little bit of a story is that when my son was diagnosed with autism, like as a mum, and if anybody's ever been through this, it's an incredibly hard time, and you sort of project into the future and all these different scenarios. And I remember going to my pediatrician and he said 90 days. And he said, that's all you should focus on, because all the other scenarios probably won't even happen. So how can you be the best version of yourself, best version of your mum as a mum, and to make him the best version of himself. So I say that now to teams as well. Just focus on the next quarter. Like we are going to be living in a time of great adaptability, and we can actually focus on different scenario planning. And the likelihood is actually we're going to get it all wrong.
Yes.
So let's just take it one step at a time. But as long as you've got your true north.
Yeah.
I love that.
90 days, it actually makes it digestible and manageable, and you're a lot less fearful. Yeah. Because you're like, I can do the 90 days.
Yes.
Yeah. And everything changed so quickly. So the whole 5-year plan or the 2-year plan, but it's really a balance of having that true north, having that short-term plan. Yeah, I love that, and thanks for sharing that story.
Though. It is, people talk about the pace, but humans don't necessarily react to the same pace. So the tech industry is going extremely fast. But what we're not seeing is that same level of pace with the general public. So I think there's a real kind of disconnect around the time. Like, that's why I think scenario modeling of when this will be embedded is quite fascinating in itself.
Yeah, but another thing that's important to note, because we're not machines, right? Like, just because the tech is advancing in such rapid pace, like, we're built differently, It's supposed to serve us, right? Not the other way.
And I don't want to go, but it is interesting. I mean, if you sort of go down that, okay, we're going to go fully automated, then what will happen is we'll have to go to a universal income, which means that whole categories won't be able to be supported. Like, we won't have enough, funds from the government. There's a whole heap of stuff. Like, so, I mean, you can't automate everything because humans still need to play a role. Otherwise, there'll be a disconnect with the society won't sort of survive in its current context. So the one thing that humans are very interesting, we've always been incredibly adaptable.
Yes.
So I feel like, again, we don't know what the future is going to be like, but I actually am very positive. And also there's so much good that's going on from like reinvention of the aged care industry.
Yes.
I mean, I'm excited for when I go there because I'll have a robot that can make me tea. There'll be so many good positive things. What's happening in medicine and there's so much, even in the humanitarian space, which I've come from. So I think that's the big thing, is how do we keep also talking about the positives?
Yeah. But also not burying our heads in the sand, right? Looking at it 100%. With an open eyes and putting all the guardrails in place and all the policies. It's really just making the best of the situation, right? And being optimistic. Like you said, like, we've adapted with whatever technology or whatever happened. Humanity has always adapted and will always find a way to adapt as well.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of ways of looking at this. I think if I were a business owner on a board, I would look at it from a risk perspective and say, okay, what are the future potential risks that are coming? And what if there was an AI native competitor that didn't have employees, that had a very profitable business model and it worked 24/7 and very smart? And, I've got this AI competitor, and then on the other side, I've got this big, bulky business, and I'm trying to get people along the journey. I'm like, come on, guys, use ChatGPT, and you're kind of fighting this battle against adoption with humans versus your upcoming competition that could blow you out of the sky. Like, it could dead out your company overnight. So for me, if I was on the board of any organization, I would be thinking about the risk of that and how do I mitigate against that?
100%.
How do I prepare for a future world? And, I had this board session with an organization, nonprofit, and that out of all of the different scenarios, we looked at sustainability and all sorts of future things. And they were like, oh, AI native charity. What? What would that mean? What if they were super effective and we still have 20% of our donations go to our staff, but it's like 100% of donations will go to the cause because there's no middle cost. So it's a really different world. And when that will happen, is it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? The board is responsible for mitigating against those kind of risks. So they need to have the literacy around what the future could hold. And I think without that, it's like a lot of organizations will cease to exist over the next 5 years, 10 years maybe, because they just won't have that structure. I think organizations like North's, where you have taken that journey very early and looking at the other clubs in the industry, you're well ahead of them. So you're going to be more resilient to that kind of change because you're already halfway through the adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the exact same thing, right? Just going back to how we convince the early adopters as well, like even with our own client that went live with Agentforce, like I think they had in their minds, like, if we're going to make a mistake, we want to make those mistakes now ahead of our competitors.
Yeah,
right?
that's
and
right.
by the time they're still figuring out whether they want to do it, they're already optimizing. Right?
Yeah.
And can you share how you were able to get, our client across the board in terms of approval?
Yeah, so it was a really hard conversation because we calculated their current cost per case. It was cheap, and we compared it to the Agentforce cost at the time, which was a little bit more expensive, and it was more expensive than a human answering a case. We're like, oh shit, that doesn't stack up. It should stack up, but it doesn't. So we actually just took the whole conversation off, and the client agreed to, because of R&D. They were like, well, we've got to do some R&D around AI, so let's just use this as R&D, and it paid off. ROI-wise,
because they really have the innovative mindset.
Yeah, it was R&D justified, not ROI justified, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Let's focus on the optimism. I love that we all decided that let's be optimistic. Let's talk about the stories where we've seen results, like real results, and inspiring. It doesn't have to be fully about money or business results. Like AI stories that's really inspiring. That's our thing.
Yeah, and I think, our Agentforce rollout, whilst we're sort of in month 4 now, we've seen great results, and it comes back to community at the end of the day for us, which is really important. So initially, we wanted to really support our contact center by culling those low value, no value calls out of it. So the agent in the first 4 months, we've managed to reduce 10% of the calls out of the call center.
Amazing.
But they've increased by 5% the revenue that they're driving through that call center because they're focusing on the high value calls.
Love it.
We're engaging with our members digitally now more than ever. 1 in 3 of our 1,900 cases so far have occurred when the call center's closed from 7 p.m. till 8 a.m. So 1 in 3 of our members want to connect with us during those hours, a lot of them between midnight and 4 a.m., interestingly enough. And we're able to do that now.
Yes.
What I love, bringing it back to the whole digital transformation journey, is today we give back 13% more in community support than we did before we turned the lights on to our new tech stack. And that's a big number. We give back $1.8 million a year in community support to those who need it most. So that's a number that we really, thrive, and our whole team thrives on. We love giving back to the community. And the more our members engage with us, the more that we can give back to the community. And that's what drives us every day, is how do we grow that engagement? How do we get 1 extra visit? And, we've grown member visitation by 2 visits annually as well. So if every member, 77,000 members, are visiting twice more a year, that means a lot to the bottom line. So the CFO's happy, the CEO's happy,
Correct.
CMO's ecstatic.
Community.
The community is winning
Members
at the end of the day.
happy.
So it's a win-win on all parts.
Mine's a little bit different. I'm seeing so many little use cases which are really successful. I think some of the ones aren't necessarily that connected to marketing, but one was Queensland Teachers. So they've worked with Microsoft on a pilot, and it's fascinating. I mean, if you think about how hard it is to actually get something through a teaching community, because it's a very analog, mostly analog way of sort of delivery. So they were actually there, people could research it online, but it's a fascinating scenario of how they actually used AI in multiple levels, and they actually saved teachers between 5 and 9 hours a week, which is a real game changer. And things that are happening in the aged care sector. So especially, we're going to have, there's an increase of aged, and according to Robin, we might all be in aged care indefinitely, which is a little bit scary. But anyway, so I've seen that, like I was mentioning, even these amazing exoskeletons that nurses can put on to now be able to lift patients so they don't hurt their backs. And there's just a lot of those really interesting moments of how, I was talking to the guide dogs, and they were actually saying that people, now with driverless cars, there's going to be this real sense of enablement of people that have sight issues, that they'll be able to go and have independence in, taking their own car. And so even just little things like being able to pick up somebody in their car. And, there's just so many beautiful little things. Also the way, we haven't even talked about quantum, but there's some really interesting things then about how can we actually potentially use quantum to even help with solving some of the climate issues and things. So I'm a bit like you. I sort of go into, but in a different way. I'm sort of going down rabbit holes of really interesting use cases across many, many industries.
But these are human wins, right?
Yes.
This is a perfect example of how a technology is serving us, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that you feel empowered.
Yes.
Right? You really win the power back.
And also, there's another one, which is the UNICEF Magic Box.
Love it.
So there's also how it's being used in development and humanitarian relief is it's fascinating. So I'm actually, so it's human first.
Yes.
And using AI to make some radical changes.
Yeah, that's the win. That's really like the, winning stories of, seeing how human can improve their lives and, the connection as well that we built with others.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about the rate of innovation. Like those are today's technologies, but it's like, what's the future? Yeah. And people always tell me, aren't you worried about like just dying alone? I'm like, no, I'll have robots. Like, they'll be great friends to me for the rest of my life. Like, I don't need anyone.
Yeah, they're so nice to us, aren't they?
They are,
right?
yeah.
And sometimes I have to tell my Lumi, don't be biased. Like, I'd love to have a really holistic view on this and not miss my blind spots. But going back to my important question, where have you seen like real wins?
Yeah, so our clients that we've talked about a fair bit, they had a 38% decline in cases over a 6-month period. So that was really like we had an expected number of cases they should have had. They had 38% less, and we can only reason that's like due to the agentic AI support. Outside of that, 50% of cases were deflected. So they would have started as cases originally, but they never got to the case because the question was handled. So I think there's some very tangible numbers, and those will just continue. I think it's inevitable that you'll have those kind of numbers. I think the softer numbers are things like accessibility, like inclusivity, having someone that can talk to an agent about something very personal that they wouldn't be comfortable talking about with a human. I even prefer to use the Coles self-checkout. Like, just, I don't want to say hello to a human or be like, how's your day going? Or do the niceties. Like, I'd just rather get in and out of my Coles experience. Yeah. And I'm sure customers are going to want the same as well. I think we've got this perception that customers want to deal with a human. They want that empathy and that human experience. But in reality, you can fake empathy with a robot. You can make it seem like it's very empathetic. And give a human the same experience. So.
I think the most important thing is the option, right? Giving people the choice.
Yeah.
Right? I was having this conversation with someone today. Like, the beautiful thing about Australia are like coffee shops. When you go in there, I have a usual. I don't want to be served by a robot. I want to have that, authentic connection. But certain things like, I want to be fast and efficient. I have the option, but you can't reduce it shouldn't be at the expense of reducing that human connection.
Yeah. But with the human connection, there's fallibility. Like one of 5 coffee shops you go into, the barista's a bit of a dickhead, or they're just like not interested, or they don't acknowledge you when you walk in. I'd much rather.
That only happens in Paris, Robin, not in Sydney.
Wrong country.
Yeah. But it's like people are human and they come with weaknesses and flaws. And, I don't mind if a robot was super empathetic, super helpful, super knew my name and my last order. Like, great. I'd happily get coffee off that person.
I think that's to your point. I think the hard thing is, what does the construct of humanity look like if it's completely intersected with tech? So I think you represent a segment, like you're a persona in yourself, right? Yeah. So my concern is what happens with the next generation if we are getting so connected to a situation where relationships are complex and they're hard and you're navigating it and it's tiring for people, and we've got a tsunami of anxiety issues of children and I get concerned because it's a lot easier to text. At the moment we've got a texting generation. It's going to get much easier to then have a relationship with a companion. And then also there's a whole ethical things of what happens when that companion potentially gets shut off. So is there going to be a sort of a mourning period? What does that kind of look like in terms of interdependence?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. It's just an interesting transition because I think there'll be some people, to your point, that will be, as long as they're given that option of opting in. But I think it goes back to then, how do you deeply understand what your customer wants? So just choosing a tech because it can do it might not necessarily be actually at the long term what is ethical, but also what they actually want.
Yeah.
So you represent a organization which is all about bringing communities together, right? So that's the last thing you necessarily want is everything to be so hyper automated
From
that
a
you
CX
actually
experience,
that it actually takes away from that experience.
No, definitely. And you know what? QR ordering. You know, I like restaurants now when I can just scan at the table and all. I love it.
Yes.
And we've got it across our group. But why was there low take up at our 2 key venues? Because the average age is 67.
Yes.
You know, we implemented it across the group and one of, you know, Greens at North Sydney, phenomenal results.
Yeah.
Everyone's using the QR codes to order. It's great. But at our core venues where, you know, they want that human connection.
Yeah.
They want the concierge to know them. They want the concierge to say, how are your grandkids? I know they're here from interstate with you this week. They love that. They thrive for that. And we would never want to lose that. So we've got to make sure that we're using what we're using ethically, but for efficiencies, while keeping the CX at the level that our members and our guests want.
It's a bit of a balance. Like I think we're seeing that with banks at the moment where they're shutting down regional branches because it doesn't make that much sense for them. And I understand their perspective, but it really affects those, you know, the older generation that can't do online banking. It excludes them. So it's almost like, what is the responsibility to ensure, even if it's AI driven, it's inclusive for everyone?
Absolutely. That whole inclusion, I think if you can summarize that, it's human led, tech enabled, you know, like soul led. There has to be soul in what we do, you know, and the purpose of it is still to
define soul.
I think we need another hour for that.
See, I think there could be this interesting, again, statistically, we're very bad at predicting the future, but I think there could even be a little bit of a resurgence in like people going to live theatre and going to markets. And I think there'll be pockets where I think people will go, you know, for example, will people go back to bookstores because there will be that sort of moment of, I think there'll be some surprising pockets that won't transition. Like we all thought that when DVDs came out that nobody was going to go to the movies anymore, and they reinvented that experience that actually, you know, people still, and they were still valid in that sort of era. So I think there'll be some interesting evolutions, but I'm so with you as to, if you've got an organisation that's not capable of big adaptability, somebody will come in and disrupt it pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's interesting, like in COVID, the digital divide became a thing, remember? It's like, do you have a computer? Can you work at home? Or are you kind of offline? You know, and there's like this two parts of people, and these people are disadvantaged in society now because they didn't have access to the internet or a computer. I think we're facing the same issue with AI. It's like there's going to be people that adopt it and people that are like, actually, I want to go analog. And I totally get those people. I love being in the forest without the internet. But I think there's going to be maybe a divergence of society where there's people that are truest. They're like, we just want to be family and culture and community, and then there's going to be digitally native people, and
there will definitely be off-grid communities. I mean, I truly believe there'll be communities that will, but we can't all be off-grid. So I sort of we keep talking about being AI ready, but I really love the concept of how could you actually then make a framework for yourself and your family. Like, what does AI ready mean for you, and what are the boundaries that you want to keep? So how do you have time where you're off-grid, in-grid, and sort of create that? So I don't think you have to go and grow tomatoes. Not that there's anything wrong with tomatoes, but I just don't think you need to go and live off the land because, you know.
Okay. Final advice, start with you.
I think the storytelling's critical. Have a purpose, have a vision, and really take your key stakeholders on that journey with you, but do it at a steady pace that your organization can manage.
Encourage and be bold.
Be bold, people.
Louise?
Oh, I like the bold. I think take a breath and work out.
Love it.
Take that moment to really plan and get your frameworks right, true north, and take everybody on the journey in a human-focused and ethically focused way.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think just test and learn. I totally agree with what you've said. I think just test and learn, just get into it. The more you can play around with it, the more you can understand it.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has been so good. Like, I think we could talk for days.
Yes,
definitely.
There's so much more to say, but you've heard it from the experts. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.